Whereas again, that's not a thing here at all and hasn't been for a long time. So I think that's just a really good example with Sharp of they did it really well. Because they went straight to the heart of what is very, very British, and that's football.
Yeah.
They just went, right, where can we put ourselves to give us maximum exposure whilst also showing an understanding of cultural norms and traditions.
Your business's success depends on relationships, relationships with customers, relationships with employees, and relationships with stakeholders. What do they all have in common? They're all human. Because no matter if your business is B2B or B2C, it's really H to H, human to human. Welcome to the Human Connection Podcast. I'm your host, Karl Pontau. Each week, I'll bring you stories, insights, and practical advice from experts that you can apply to your growing company and daily life. This week, I'm excited to connect with Lewis Sayes. He is a self-taught digital and cross-cultural marketing and business specialist from Manchester, UK. He helps businesses of all shapes and sizes understand their audience psychologically and develop stories that appeal to them. Congrats on building cultural understanding, and welcome to the Human Connection Podcast.
Hey, yeah, thank you so much for having me. Real honor to be on it, absolutely.
Awesome. So what do companies get wrong when it comes to entering new international markets? It seems like there's a lot of potential pitfalls. Well, is there a few that really stand out as common ones companies make that could be easily avoided if they just thought about it more?
Well, I think the biggest mistake people make is they think they can just do things the same way, and it's not going to be. They're not going to see any difference in results. They think this worked in America, so of course it'll work in the UK or vice versa. And that's simply not the case, unfortunately. It'd be a lot easier if it was, but it's not. And actually, I think one of my favorite examples of this, and it'll be interesting to see whether you agree with me on this one, is that I use Meghan Markle and James Corden as two examples of where, if they'd have just understood this a bit better, this might have gone a lot better for both of them. With Meghan Markle, obviously, she came over to the UK and joined the British royal family, and I think she remained very unapologetically American. And I think fair play to her, absolutely. But I think when she was joining such a traditional institution, she needed to understand that she needed to market herself differently. She needed to show a little bit more of an appreciation for customs, traditions that we have over here. And similarly, James Corden went over to the States, and definitely in our eyes, he really tried to become American. And so you've got an example there where actually, if both of them had done what the other did, they probably would have been more successful or been received a little bit better. That's my opinion on it. And I find that that's a really interesting case study to take first, because marketing is really not just about companies. It's, as you said, it's about people. It's human to human, and everything we do is marketing. And so,
yeah, I think it's an interesting example because it comes down to, I think, just knowing your audience and what's going to appeal to them, or if you're trying to get a certain response from your audience, understanding them better and knowing how you need to interact with them will make that a lot easier. And I can see how an American going over to the UK, especially, like I said, joining the British royal family, the Brits are going to have a certain expectation of how someone in the royal family needs to behave, and there's a lot of tradition there. Whereas coming, I think, from James Corden over to the US, I think there's more it's kind of the opposite, where they want to expect them to be more because like British, not just try and like put on a facade of, well,
Yeah.
I'm American now. It's like, so there, in both cases, it was not understanding what the audience was expecting or not tailoring the message to that audience well.
100%. Yeah, 100%. I mean, with Corden, you've got to look at it and think, did he know how he was going to be different? Because obviously in America you have a lot of American talk shows, so you didn't need another American talk show. That should have been, I would have thought, that should have been what he was going in there thinking, and what his team were going in there thinking. And I think he really should have probably leaned into being this British comedian that's come over to the States and is doing something different, rather than maybe trying to be like a lot of the other American talk show hosts. And it's a really bizarre example, really, because one of the first things you learn when you're starting a business is you need to know how to differentiate yourself from the competition. And somehow it just seemed like he didn't quite get that.
And it's interesting because he kind of replaced Craig Ferguson, who was from Scotland, and even though he was very much like big on, like he became a U.S. citizen and stuff, but he still was very much Scottish and had his own views and like his own quirky way of doing things. And his show was very different, very bare bones, just kind of But then, like he had a robot sidekick. Like it was just such a weird, like kooky, weird, just kind of Craig doing silly stuff. And it made it so much. It made it really popular and successful. Whereas, yeah, if you're just trying to be like, and it makes sense. It's weird that so many businesses think or get stuck in this mindset of, oh, well, other companies do it this way, therefore we should do it this way, because they feel like just because it worked for someone else, it'll work for them. But in reality, what works in the business world is doing things differently, especially from the marketing standpoint. And if you're not willing to be different, especially if you're trying to enter a new market where there's already a ton of established players and people don't already have that trust with you, if you don't stand out and don't have a way of getting that into people's headspace and being top of mind, then it's almost like not even worth trying.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, yeah, with Corden, he could have just stayed in the UK and been a talk show host over here. But there's an argument that he actually saw there was an opportunity to be a talk show host in the States because he could bring something different. But then I think just somewhere along the line, it just got a little bit muddled because, yeah, I mean, Craig Ferguson's a perfect example because it was unlike any of the other talk shows in the States. You had the "I caramba" every time someone swore, which was funny. It made it appealing, and it was a little bit touch and go as to whether some things that were said were okay and not, and so there was always that edginess to it. And yeah, I think perhaps Corden just tried to play it a little bit too safe. I would suggest.
And so, I think it's good to have these examples of individuals and like the TV shows. But when it comes to businesses, what are some examples I've seen like where companies have done it well versus not well? Do you have some examples you can share with that to put in a little more context for viewers?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of my favorite examples is Sharp, the manufacturer, and I had an opportunity to do a little bit of consultative work with them through a third party last year, and I was looking at what had been sent over, and it was basically sales transcripts that they'd had, and they were talking to people, and they'd noticed that sales weren't as easy as they used to be, and they were calling people up and they were saying, "Hey, we're calling from Sharp, one of the world's leading tech manufacturers," and people were applying, "Who?" And they, I saw one that was really funny where they'd said, "Oh, we used to sponsor Manchester United in the 90s," and then the person on the other end of the call went, "Oh yes, yeah, Sharp. I remember you now." And then it was sort of followed by a bit of a, "Wait, you guys are still going? I, I haven't heard of you in ages." And I think the reason that one's interesting, and in terms of doing something well in another country, is that as far as I'm aware, Sharp's Japanese. I'm hoping I've got that right and remembered that correctly. But as far as I'm aware, they're Japanese. And there's very much a mindset there of whoever picks up the phone and calls the most people will be the more successful company. The marketing wasn't as big an idea for them as it certainly should have been. And so we actually, with just looking at Sharp, we have an example of a company that used to do it really well and then got perhaps arguably a little bit lazy and stopped marketing themselves properly in other countries. And the thing is, cold calling just isn't a thing that's going to work as well in the UK. We're not really a cold calling nation. The minute someone sends me something on LinkedIn that's obviously a sales message, I just go, "That's pointless." Like, I don't know who you're going to get with that. It's going to take you ages, and you'll get one in every few hundred that you text. But that's the whole point of it. It's a numbers game. But over here, that just isn't a thing that companies that are wanting to act like modern companies should probably be doing. It has its place, but not really that big over here. Whereas, okay, Japan, China, it is a big thing. Even in the States, you can get away with quite a lot of cold calling because you still very much have the door-to-door salesmen and stuff like that. Whereas again, that's not a thing here at all and hasn't been for a long time. So I think that's just a really good example with Sharp of they did it really well. Because they went straight to the heart of what is very, very British, and that's football.
Yeah.
They just went, right, where can we put ourselves to give us maximum exposure whilst also showing an understanding of cultural norms and traditions? And they thought, right, football, Manchester United, at the time, biggest club, certainly in the UK. And they've gone down, I think, as one of the most iconic kit sponsors in football. Just football, full stop. And then, yeah, I think they at some point they just forgot about that and thought that they could dine off that one thing forever. And I don't think it's necessarily worked. So I think they have to go back to the drawing board a little bit.
Yeah, it makes sense that they it's funny how you said like they did it really well. Getting the Man U sponsorship definitely gets their eyeballs in front of a bunch of people, and with how big of a fan base that Man U has, that it would be very recognizable for a lot of Britons, and even like people internationally, because I know I've seen people in the States with Man United like jerseys on and stuff. So that's a great way then if they were doing more outreach while they were sponsoring. Oh yeah, you guys sponsor Man U, and then if someone's a fan, then there's automatically that like, oh, I like you guys who support the football team that I love. But if they stopped and they pulled out that sponsorship, then and waited a while, and it can't be surprised that people have forgotten, because there's just a lot of time and people's attention spans are short, but then also there's some other sponsor that's now in front of people's faces getting all the attention, and that's going to replace, when people think of what companies sponsor their favorite team, Sharp is not there anymore, and someone else will replace, taking up that brain space. And there's only so much brain space people have for holding on to these sort of connections. And then with how many other companies are out there vying for that attention, if you take your foot off the gas and you're not continuing to foster those relationships, it's no surprise that especially in a few other years, people will no longer remember who you are until you have to remind them. And if you're having to remind someone on a cold call that your company, this supposedly international outfit, that's a huge problem.
Yeah, absolutely. The minute you tell people how big you are, but they go, I've never heard of you. You're on the defensive immediately, which is always going to be a difficult hill to climb. One of the other things that, moving away slightly from Sharp, just onto a really easy example that people can pick up and use for their own businesses, whatever markets they're trying to break into, is just look at the language used, because the way you would write ad copy in the States versus the UK is wildly different. And I think one of the most simple examples of it is actually that American ad copy can be a lot more direct and almost aggressive, not in a violent way, just really in your face. Like, I mean, as we'd say over here, it's typical American, really. It's bold, it's got an air of arrogance about it to a degree, and it's things like, buy now, do this now, absolutely don't go anywhere, this has to be done right this minute. And while we do have that over here, it's amazing how often you see things that are a lot more like, why not try? Like, why not try this free trial, or do this or do that? Why? It's less committal. And again, that's something where if you were an American company coming over to the UK and you came out with all of this bold, slightly arrogant, slightly brash messaging, you're probably just going to look like a bit of an idiot in many ways.
Yeah, there's, even though people think, oh, they speak English, it should be easy just to copy and paste stuff over. There's the cultural differences, and it's not just the language, but it's the expectation of how you approach it, and like I said, the tone is very different. And I think that's a huge mistake that companies make, that your audience is going to see things the same way you do. And I think it's actually probably more of a problem if you're doing, like, if the company or the country share a language, because you think, oh, we don't have to necessarily make any big changes to the copy because the language is the same, but there's all the cultural context that you have to keep in mind. And I think it's interesting how there's that the difference you just mentioned there, where Americans like telling people the thing you want them to do, like, you have to do it like right now, and there's that kind of a lot of like FOMO and pressure, whereas the UK, like, the why not stuff is almost the opposite of, like, it does. Like, if you ask me, like, which one of these was British or which one was American, even just show me one at a time, like the why not, I definitely would have been, that sounds more British to me than buy now, just because of that, the little cultural idiosyncrasies there. So I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, it's It's funny because I see it a lot with businesses where they are saying, well, we're a UK-based business, which means we can quite easily access through shared language the States, Canada, Australia, New Zealand. Like they immediately just go, yeah, we can do that because we all speak the same language. But they they quickly realize if they don't change anything, that what works in the UK is not going to work in any of those. Because even if you're in the US and you try and sell in Canada or vice versa, you might share a massive long border, but the differences in the way you do things are still vast. And yeah, I think one of the best things to keep in mind is there's a reason why a lot of every big business that goes into a new market will usually hire either a full in-house team in the country that they're going into, or at the very least they work with agencies from where they're going into. And so I think one bit of advice for any company looking at going into another market abroad has always got to be seek consultative advice from people in the country that you're looking at going to, because just trying to guess yourself is always going to be difficult. So speaking to people from the country you're going into is always a first sort of step, really.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for connecting with me today, Lewis. If you enjoyed this episode of the Human Connection podcast, please like, leave a review, and share it. If you'd like to connect with myself or Lewis, check out the links in the show notes. And remember, no matter if your business is B2B or B2C, it's really H to H, human to human. Happy connecting.